After blipping half the population out of the city in the last episode, an event that was needed. It was inevitable. We needed to make some pretty big changes to the layout of the city, and it is now feeling more organic and realistic. It has been stripped back to its most basic form, and it is now ready for the masses. But then also, kind of not really. Because as part of this stripping back, I've stripped back all the infrastructure. We are now rocking the most basic and bare bones of roads. So as we add the density, we then gotta add the infrastructure. Then we'll add a bit more density, and then we'll add a bit more infrastructure. We'll upgrade the roads, add a fancy underground sunken highway, and redevelop that old highway scar. And then the cherry on top. Something I didn't really plan to build, but no regrets. Welcome back to St. Andros. And of course, the problems already exist, so we should probably focus on just adding in some simple bits and pieces to our highway to solve a bit of this, and then we can start zoning out a bit more because, God, can you imagine what's gonna look like when we actually have some tall skyscrapers and offices and just high density residential areas around here? Then it's just going to be a total nightmare. But I actually reckon we can do some really simple fixes already, and that should fix a lot of this. I think the simplest thing we can do is actually utilize this highway. So we got a bridge here, but I'm going to drag it all underneath, all around here, and we'll have a whole bunch of connections connecting to these streets, just trying to find the right ones. You know, maybe like this would be a good one. It looks like a pretty main road, and we've already got some good open space to make those ramps that go from the underground to our street level. And then we could do some sort of interchange here, which I've left, it's a bit of space, not tons of space, but a bit of space. And then we've also got this is the path of where I think an elevated section is going to go. It'll go underneath this section here, and of course, reconnect up to our highway over at Port Pubella. So not exactly underground, but we will get there. I just wanted to drag it out and see its positioning because there's a bit of canon behind all of this. So hear me out because it's a little convoluted, but I reckon it makes a lot of sense. So this was not always an underground highway. At some stage, it was an elevated highway, but we got rid of it because it was ugly and noisy and no one liked it. And it is prime real estate within the downtown to redevelop it into maybe offices or new apartments, or maybe even spruce it up with a bit of a park. I am taking inspiration from Boston as per usual, and Boston did a pretty similar thing, if not the exact same thing. A once old, rusty, elevated, and noisy highway was converted into an underground section, and now all that prime real estate is now being utilized for other things, and it's mostly a park, which is pretty nice. Although we're not going to do fully a park, we might do sections of it as a park. I am still trying to figure that out, but I do like seeing the path of this thing and seeing how the roads have been somewhat influenced by it as well. So that's mostly underground now, which is looking pretty lovely. I have had about, 5 or 6 crashes while trying to make this work. Basically, anytime I tried to upgrade these retaining walls, where there is a bit of like a weird section of, I think you might have noticed it, but it's kind of like half underground, but then still kind of poking through, it'd crash the game, and pretty annoying. So what I've had to do instead is I've just left this bit open just to show you, but I have had to drag this out manually rather than trying to upgrade it. And that is obviously very ugly, and I won't leave it like that. But when we get to the interchange, I will fix them up then. But I've just saved it because what I want to do is the very thing that was causing those crashes in the first place, well, at least sort of. I'm going to upgrade this section so that we've got the retaining wall on the sides of the highway. There we go, that works pretty well. I might even have a bit more of a section around here that can just be at ground level. And then the retaining wall can kick in at about that point. Oh man, my highway's gone back to that thing again. Ah, that's really annoying. And so with that highway now there, I think I'm going to have our first tunnel connection. Maybe, I know I said this road here as it is somewhat of a main road with multiple lanes. I reckon I actually might utilize this space here. It's a bit of an awkward shape, so it does fit the bill for something that we could play with. Also, I like the fact that we have a one-way road right here, and we've also got this street which ends at this point. So that does give us some possibilities for a continuation of a ramp that goes underground, and then we have maybe a connection connected to this one, and maybe even turn this to another one-way road. I might try and use Road Builder here and upgrade this road so it has an extra lane, and then I'm going to remove the parking just so we don't get too complicated, and then I'll use that same road and I'll upgrade this section. Well, this is becoming very finicky. Anytime I make some changes to this underground section, it turns into a bit of a hybrid of being underground and then being slightly covered by this grass. I don't know what's going on. It's driving me nuts. But I'm sort of thinking that I actually might just go back to how it was before and then... Oh, I'm a bit nervous about changing it. What am I gonna do? And the game crashed. Alright, new plan. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove all of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out this highway at ground level. Well, sort of. Maybe just like low enough so it's not connecting to any of these streets. And then once I've got that pretty much established, I'll make all these connections to these roads, and then I'll lower them into the ground and turn it into a underground section. Jeez. I hope that works. I don't have the highest of hopes. I feel like it's all gonna come crashing down, but I am going to try and upgrade all this, and hopefully we don't have any more crashes, because crashes are bad. We're getting somewhere. I mean, it's turning into a, you thought that this was going to be easy, didn't you? But it's not. It's not easy. Okay, we're starting to see some usage, which is nice. We can obviously make some improvements down here, even widening some of these roads. I think is going to help quite a bit. I will connect up this one-way road so he does connect up to this part. And I really like the fact that we have these two one-way roads that are going along this area. In fact, I'm going to continue that same theme all the way across. We will elevate this section and make that one way as well. At some point, I'll remove parking and probably turn this into maybe a couple of extra lanes or something, especially down here. But I will just leave this for now. We do need to continue adding more bridges. Take a look at this custom bridge. Now, this is really nice. This is part of a pack that I just grabbed from Paradox Mods, and there's a bunch to choose from, but this one really caught my eye because it does, of course, have all of this section underneath, which is dedicated to a train line. Now, I am so stoked about that. It is going to complicate things a little bit because I didn't really plan to have a train line out here, but I just can't help myself. This is just going to be a lot of fun. I reckon over this way, we can figure out where that train line goes, but I'm half tempted to drag that thing down the center of this highway. So if you reckon that'd be a fun idea, let me know. Now, that train line does complicate things because as I drag out this network, I do have to get the bridge perfect when I do drag it out the first time. I can't adjust it with Move It because it is separate for some reason. It is disconnected from the actual bridge itself and I can't select it. So wherever I drag it, it has to be perfect. And another issue is that the height of this thing is going to be a bit difficult to get right because this is basically the limit for how low I can get it if I want ships like this to be going underneath. So I am gonna say no ships to go underneath. Like maybe something else can go underneath if we ever get something else, but I think cargo ships just don't go this way. We do have other ways of getting out to the sea, so I think that's gonna just have to be the way it is. Hey, finally got it. I mean, I'm sure that probably looked like a couple of, maybe like a minute of building for you guys, but it has taken maybe an hour and a half just to try and get this thing to work. It has been a bit clunky and trying to make it so that it is somewhat straight and somewhat even on both sides. And the incline over here is kind of realistic, but then also could probably be a little bit better. My technique in the end was I actually had to drag out the end connections first, and then I could meet in the middle and drag out this thing a little bit better. But yeah, it took a little while, but I'm glad I've chosen this one because I actually think it's a way better fit for the city. I love that underneath section, and when we actually have a train going under there too, geez, that's just gonna be so lovely. But we're not here to appreciate a bridge, we're here to connect up and see some people actually using this thing. Alright, I have been spending a bit of time just working on this interchange and highway, and it's pretty wonky. There's a lot that we need to detail and fix up, which I'll do probably in a time lapse a little bit later in this video. I just want to connect things up and see how it all works. But man, there is a lot of really fun things going on. So first of all, I reckon that you're probably thinking, hey Toddles, this train line's pretty fun. And it is. It's a lot of fun. I've actually just finished a live stream where we came up with the idea that I was gonna have a bunch of different types of passenger services for a train connection around the city. And of course we've got our subway, and then we've also got the Amtrak going into our central station, but there is also another train network. This is a newer passenger service. It is targeting places that are, you know, like Pubella and Castle Point and maybe even Smog Island and everywhere else that we do out this way. It's going to be a bit of an express train and a lot newer than our subway network. And we've given it the title of Samurai, which really rolls off the tongue. And that stands for St. Andros Metropolitan and Regional Express Rail. And you know what? That's what this is going to be. At some point that will connect up to our central station, but I don't really know how I'll get there. I mean, we could just go underground and all that, but I don't know. I'm sort of thinking that he might actually go over towards Patronville and maybe even stop here and then go around. So not exactly a direct route, but I'm still working on that. Something else I'm still working on is this section, which is all inspired by this. I think that this is a pretty famous part of this highway, which is a triple deck highway. I think one of it's actually been converted into a walkway now, but there is a pretty interesting interaction with the cliff here and this highway as it stretches around Brooklyn. So that's what the inspiration is, and I will do something similar around here in terms of the apartments and stuff, but for now, it's just poking in this direction. And speaking of for now, let's just do a very simple connection. Temporary. I think that this is gonna hold itself pretty well, so I reckon we can move on to a bit more density. I just want to show you, I do have this section down here, which is a good connection to our historical St. Andros. I'm actually so stoked with this bridge. This just adds so much. I know it's like pretty similar to what it was before, but I think that this is actually just so much better. It is a great looking bridge. So all this, stoked about. But I am now ready to add some more down in St. Andros, because at the moment we have a crazy high demand for all things residential. So let's start with that, and then we'll get some offices. So just by placing down a bunch of row houses and even some higher density apartments, it has fulfilled that demand quite a bit, so I am gonna put a pin on that. We do have another bit of demand, and that is for some sort of hospital around here. So I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to place down an asset that I've always wanted to place down. I haven't used this one yet. It is this Art Deco hospital, and it just looks awesome. And I might even just remove this street entirely. We don't really need it, and we do have enough streets down here anyway, and that just has such an imposing look within the city. I absolutely love that. The historical side of St. Andros is really starting to show. We've got quite a few historical buildings starting to pop up, and I think I'm going to continue to lean into the Art Deco style, because I am an absolute sucker for it, and I think that might be kind of fun to do within a portion of St. Andros. And then in another side of it, we focus more on modern architecture and modern skyscrapers. And I think we're getting pretty close to that time. We have no demand for it at the moment. It looks like our taxes are letting us down. We are making, well, we're still losing money, but we are on track to eventually make money. The more zoning I add, then we will eventually start seeing a bit of a profit as people start to move in, especially offices. I can even see some high density demand creeping up and down. It's just rebalancing. Yeah, there we are, a bit of high density. So let's lean into that. And this spot in particular is really important to get the skyline right, because it is so iconic, and the types of buildings that I choose, they need to be pretty perfect. Like there's a whole bunch of them that I think is working really well. Like I love this guy, I'm gonna keep him. Obviously the cathedral is perfect, and the hospital, I love it. And I have spent a little bit of time just, I mean, it's very off-brand for me because I rarely do this, but I've just aligned him up to the point of our town hall. Yeah, I know. Like, how often do I do this? I feel like I am, in more cases, kind of going off center. So, yeah, you can appreciate that if you do appreciate things like that. I've really thought about the sight lines for a lot of things within this city. And on that, I did place down these two buildings, which I love, and they fit in pretty well there, but what doesn't really work is the fact that, well, there was actually once a highway here. Let's not forget about that. And I think that this is a little bit too old for something that was probably redeveloped maybe like, I don't know, 15 years ago. So I'm gonna grab these guys and I will place them there, which actually works probably better. And now that we have a bit of demand for some high density, maybe some more modern apartments would work. I mean, this is quite cool. That is extremely modern, but it is a nice contrast between everything else that's around here. So I'm just packing in a whole bunch of more modern buildings, and I really love the contrast between all these old red brick buildings, and then the cathedral, and then you just got these guys down here which do kind of look out of place. Totally intentional. I have spliced in 2 of these bookshops into this square center, and I reckon that looks really nice. I'm trying to find the perfect buildings for here because this is very much a point of, well, a bit of a focal point. So I do need to make sure that whatever I do place here is going to be fairly iconic. The elevated highway, the highway that once used to snake its way through here, probably ended about here and went into this tunnel and then went into this interchange, because I think that this looks like it's probably been here for a while. I don't think this is a new addition, so I am going to make it so that this section is going to have the old highway scar. So we'll have this section over here, which will be a bit of a park, and I don't know, I'm still trying to think about what I could do here. You know, maybe this road could be disconnected or something. We'll continue to figure that out. But as you can see, we are continuing to lose quite a lot of money. Traffic is flowing very nicely, so I am no longer worried about the traffic situation, but I reckon that if I continue to add high density and then also eventually some office blocks, that's when it's going to start to get problematic once again. So let's move into a time lapse, and I'm going to most probably double the population, definitely double the jobs. We'll then make some adjustments to the highway and think about some extensions, because I've got a few ideas for an extension or two. Okay, so I know I did just say that I wasn't too concerned about traffic. Everything was flowing pretty well. Well, yeah, not quite. I guess as I add in more places for people to live, then the people do end up moving in, and that causes quite a lot of bottlenecks. So this was a good test to see just how much these streets could take this amount of pressure. As it turns out, they couldn't really take this much amount of pressure. So what I ended up doing was just making some modifications to our little sunken connection down here, and I realized that all of this could actually just go into the one little intersection. I say little, but it's actually a pretty big little intersection. And I ended up adding in multiple lanes on the street because I figured there's going to be a fair few people trying to use this thing, and we needed to have some dedicated turning lanes. And as I continued just to chip away and figure out how it was going to look and function, it was lovely just seeing people actually using it, and just how well it could actually handle this amount of traffic, as we're going to be seeing a lot more when people do finally move in and commute to the city. And it's still not perfect. There's still a whole bunch that we need to change, and probably some more connections to our streets in other areas of the city is going to really make some improvements here. But for now, this is going to work out just fine. And with that, I wanted to get back to adding in some more apartment blocks and some row houses, and even just think about where some of these more custom places are going to sit, where it's a little bit more of a focal point. I found this really great apartment block, which is part of the Japan region pack, a pack that I haven't really played around too much with, but there are some really versatile buildings, especially some of the apartments. This one in particular, there are a couple of similar buildings which you can splice together, and I really like the way that this guy turned out. I am trying to connect him up to the sunken, the little underground parking lot we built in the last episode, and I feel like they kind of share the same, maybe the same infrastructure around here. We did actually need a little road that connected up to it, so that ended up working pretty well. I was feeling inspired to continue to make some of these custom blocks with some growables, so I did find a couple more places where we could splice together some different buildings, and I was very much thinking about the skyline and where certain buildings are going to sit and which ones I wanted to be focal points. So I am spending a long time just scrolling through Find It and trying to find the right buildings that we're going to kind of paint the picture of the city, you know, some of the buildings that we're going to make up the skyline, and which ones I wanted to be the most prominent. This elevated subway is going to be kind of like the perimeter of where I want some of the taller buildings to go. So I did want to have some of my favorite buildings to sit around here, so I am spending a bit of time just to splice some buildings together and choose the right colors to sort of match the colors of the skyline that I wanted. You know, this is why I like playing around with things like plot the growables and move it and recolor and all those mods that just give you so much more flexibility when it comes to being able to choose which buildings you want. I'm spending a little bit of time up at our hillside neighborhood, which we built in the last episode, because I did want this place to be pretty detailed and have a lot of charm to it. So, you know, choosing the right types of buildings to go up here and then just going through and changing a bit of the roads and adding in some trees and foliage and some little parks, and just thinking about where some of these buildings, you know, a bit better positioned. All these little things like this actually add so much. It's very subtle, but I think is the part of this game that you spend a bit of time doing it, and I think the payoff is definitely worthwhile. And while we're up here, I did ask in the last episode for some neighborhood name suggestions, and I did get quite a few from you guys. I will continue to name some at the end of this episode, but I would like to name this place Drewston, which is taking inspiration from Charleston within Boston. So thanks Blake for the suggestion. And I reckon that's pretty fitting considering that we do have the St. Andros Cathedral up here. So I don't know, I reckon we could actually include something else up here that's a bit of a nod to Drew. So if you've got any other ideas, please do let me know. Something that I had a lot of fun with was creating this block of flats. I believe the asset that I'm using is a apartment building from the UK pack, but I am imagining that this is public housing, and I will be building quite a lot more of these sort of places because I think that, it just looks great. It creates a lot of variation for the city, but then also it does add quite a lot of housing options for people moving in. And I also just like this location, just perched up on the cliffside. You'd get some pretty good views, not only of the city, but then also the airport. Yeah, probably a bit noisy, but I don't know. This is still a pretty good spot to live. I ended up creating some more public housing just a bit closer to the city, and this one I still need to detail up, but I do like its location, and I decided to go with some different types of buildings. This is a little bit more reminiscent of the sort of public housing you'd see within New York City. By default, they are a bit bright in color, but I did just change it with recolor to fit into the aesthetic of the city, and yeah, this works way, way better. But I was putting off working on a particular area because I knew that I was going to struggle to find the right types of assets for it. Around the highway scar, I did need to have some more modern buildings, and I knew that I didn't really know the exact assets to use for it. I was thinking that some kind of nice modern apartment block would be really fun, but I, again, didn't really have anything in mind. So I did try splicing in a couple of buildings together to get a bit of an idea of maybe some sort of custom modern apartment complex that I could use a bunch of buildings and just splice them together in a similar fashion as what I was doing before. And I thought I found the right buildings for it, but as you can see, they just don't splice quite as well. They would if it was a nice rectangular 90-degree angle block, but we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with a bit of a pointy one, and it's a bit tricky to find the right kind of shapes. And it just, unfortunately, just was not coming together. So as much as I really wanted to combine a bunch of these buildings and have some sort of tall building on top, yeah, just couldn't figure it out. So ended up settling with this design, which is similar to the one that I built previously, but just slightly different shape and color. But I feel like it works. But anyway, that's it for the time lapse. Let's dive back into the game. Alright, so a few nice things going on down here. I am so happy to see some density within the city once again. We do have a lot of residential demand, but I am more waiting for some office demand. And we're not going to see that until we start to see people graduating and getting that skill to warrant having offices like that. Now I think with so much demand for residential, in particular we've got a lot for medium density and high density. Let's tick both those boxes and add a bunch more. I'm going to move slightly out of the city and continue some more low rent housing. I might even zone up this entire block over here. This is a very large area, but we do need quite a lot. I'm going to use the same buildings as these ones as if they were all built by the city at the same time. Or maybe we can start mixing them up a bit. So we could do one here, maybe one there, and then bridge the gap, potentially. Ah, well, I actually kind of like that. And that is a nice big chunk of land now dedicated to some medium density housing. Not every single apartment is full of people. We are still trickling in, but that is so fine because I kind of like providing like more than enough, and then that way you don't have to really worry too much about you know, a particular type of housing. So that is gonna fulfill it for quite some time. And I'm really happy with its like looming appearance over the city. I made sure to put him on top of a fairly large hill. In fact, I think that might be the largest within the city. So quite happy with that. However, you might notice that we are now losing quite a bit of money. And that is because I realized that I was in fact totally underfunding our education. So I've just cranked him back up to a more acceptable amount, and I really hope that eventually we're going to start to get a bit more of a demand for some office, because I do want to really define that skyline. And yeah, I could just place down those buildings now, but let's just give that a little bit of time just to see if we can potentially get that demand there. What I do need to do though is I need to work on this, because this is severely under-detailed. So I've just cleaned up those ramps, just making it so that they are not quite as steep, and the swoopiness is a little bit better, but I'm also trying really hard not to get too hung up on details in certain areas, because I can just spend hours on inch changes, and sometimes you just don't really need to. That being said, I do have an idea. I've been suppressing it because I don't want to deal with the tunnels anymore, but I think we do need another tunnel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another tunnel in the center here, and this is going to be for traffic going this direction and connecting up to this part of the interchange, and then we could do an offshoot of this ramp going into it, so pretty much serving anyone who is going in this direction. Way, all right. That was a bit of an unexpected turn. I did not plan to build all of this and go to so much detail, but here we are. I mean, you guys probably saw this coming because I have, of course, this is probably the thumbnail right here, but I really did not plan to build all of this. But no regrets because there is a lot of fun stuff going on. I absolutely love this baseball field up here, and yeah, it's probably super unsafe and maybe a touch unrealistic, but I love the fact that it is just squeezed into this interchange. We've got these stands here where I reckon that'll be just a really fun place to watch a game of baseball. And yeah, once again, it's probably a bit unsafe for a lot of different reasons, but I don't know. Sometimes you got to break a couple of rules to make something like this happen. Now, you also probably just noticed that a train has just rolled past, and yeah, I have connected up the train line mostly just to see how it looks. So if I was to follow the track, then yes, this is not where I wanted to go, but I purely just wanted to build it just to see that connection out here. But I've got some real questions. Where on earth do we have a train station to connect up Pubella? I'll leave that to you guys, let me know. I'm also using a bunch of these new decals that I've just grabbed. These are awesome, massive decals that you can kind of just plop all over the place, and I'm still getting a bit of a feel for them because they're a little bit of a different type of a decal that I've never really used before. So large and obviously quite versatile, especially filling gaps like this. You know, you can kind of imagine that all around here is kind of seeing lots of changes, and I reckon that there's probably been other pieces of infrastructure around here, and as all this gets upgraded and changed, yeah, it probably goes over the top of all these old foundations and whatnot. So that's what I'm kind of imagining, and I reckon they work really well. So I'm going to continue to use some of these. I've also, this is probably my favorite spot, but it's just like a little awkward space, which is maybe like under a bit of construction, or maybe it's just like used to kind of store bits and pieces, but it's kind of like a little area that you can only get to via this ramp. And here comes a train. I'm going to put it on pause and we'll just have a look. Oh, how great. Isn't it great just adding in all that infrastructure for 4 people? Well, I mean, it's probably the placement of this station. It's probably not in the greatest of locations, and there's probably not huge amounts of incentive for people to use it. So yeah, again, when we actually build this station for reals, then I reckon we might see more people actually using it. But what you can see down here as well is we do in fact have a bit of demand for some offices. So I reckon we capitalize on that and we start to flesh out a bit more of the density. And in terms of establishing more density, I am going to try to figure out how to include some more custom and interesting buildings that are going to define the skyline and not feel too repetitive to other cities within City Skylines 2, because I think what ends up happening is that we only really have a couple to play with, so it does end up feeling kind of samey. I do have a couple of ideas in mind, with this one in particular. I personally really like this building, but I think it could be a bit taller. So what if I was to just eyedrop him? Oh, I kind of like that color too. I'm gonna splice him into the other one, and then I'm going to use move it to raise it up. And I am a big fan of that. I think it's just so much more unique. It is just so much more interesting. I'm still thinking about the black color of that building, but in terms of the tower on top, I reckon that totally works. But let's push forward. I do want to fill out that downtown a bit more. check that out. I am so stoked with this skyline, and I am just becoming more and more in love with this. Tallest building within the city now. It is, obviously not too large. Like, in terms of how big skyscrapers can get within this game, it's actually kind of on the smaller side of things. But in terms of the scale, this works very, very nicely. But I think right here, that is the money shot in my opinion. And when we develop up that waterfront, it's going to be so, so damn nice. And I've just spent some time just detailing and making this highway scar a little bit nicer. This is where the old highway was, and I think that you can really tell that this is very much new development. They've focused on some mixed zoning and some more green space, and I really love that. I love the fact that we've got this little space down here, which you can kind of see that is under construction. It's still yet to be used. Maybe it's gonna be more of this, or maybe it's gonna be more of this, or something completely different. I'm not quite sure yet. I've also added in these 3 little sculptures here. This is all a pedestrian pathway, so you can see people walking and driving. I don't think you're allowed to drive here. Or maybe you are, I'm not really quite sure. But yeah, that's a pedestrian street, so people are walking through there, and it's a nice way of just connecting things up just around the city. But I still got a lot more work to do around here. I obviously haven't worked on this space, and it might have a bit of green space, some trees, but still thinking about how that's going to look. And the reason why I'm not tackling it right now is because I think there's a good chance I might upgrade some of these roads and just change the way that it functions. So I'm just going to leave it until I do a bit of that. This building in particular is particularly nice, and I wanted him to be a bit more front and center. So I have positioned him on a bit of an angle, and this, that was minimal effort, and it just makes a huge difference. Oops, it's not quite aligned up. It is clipping into the street. So if I just shuffle him closer, maybe just rotate him, that's not too bad. And I just think paired with the rest of the buildings, I reckon that works great. And that shot right there, I know I just said that about the other angle, but man, I am really happy with this. It has taken a long time to get this episode done, and it's because I've spent like ages just thinking about where these bits and pieces are going to go and how it's all going to fit together. You know, it's not just about zoning and seeing whatever pops up. I am thinking quite a lot about how all of it is going to look, but then also function. In terms of the roads, I think that we're doing just an okay job. It's still a bit of a mess down here, but that's okay. I am still going to continue to work on it. I mean, some of it kind of just comes down to the fact that we've got people walking on these highways, which is not ideal. So I do need to tackle that as well. But problematic traffic is not really too much of a worry for me, because I do like to work on that as we continue. So if you've got any ideas, let me know on how we can connect things up a little bit better. But in the next episode, I am going to focus on detail. I'm going to be focusing on this waterfront. There's a lot to do down there, and there's a lot of other spaces that I'd like to detail up. But that, my friends, is a story for the next episode. Hey guys, thank you all so much for watching today's episode of St. Andros. It is always very much appreciated. I am feeling really happy, like seeing people back in the city and the skyline pretty well established now. It is all very exciting, and I am really keen to work on the waterfront and this little neighborhood that I'm going to build. It is probably going to be fairly detailed, and I reckon it's going to be a lot of fun getting into some of the wharves and all that old infrastructure that'll sit down there. It's going to be a real fun build, so that'll be next episode. But until then, I want to give a special thanks to some of my beloved patrons and YouTube members for making videos like this possible. Breezy, Yanni, Gary Key, J Evans III, Cat Person, Hero Solars, X Steve, Mikey, Delta Trell, and David Schenker. Cheers, legends. Catch you all in the next one. See ya.